This is not a story about drought, or nature, or misfortune. This is the story of the deadliest man-made famine in history, engineered by a dictator who valued ideology more than human life. From 1958 to 1962, as Mao Zedong demanded impossible grain quotas, villages emptied, families shattered, and hunger turned neighbors into enemies. Tonight, in Dictator's Files, we open the case of China's Great Famine and the people who paid for Mao's vision with their lives. 1958, Mao Zedong launched the Great Leap Forward, a political storm he believed would force China into a new industrial age: steel, communes, miracle harvests. Historian Frank de Kutter notes that Mao believed grain production could be increased by sheer will, and every provincial leader understood what that meant. Truth was optional. Loyalty was not. In Anhui, Party Secretary Zheng Shisheng announced yields no field had ever produced. 10 times normal. 20 times. The numbers climbed because they had to. In early 1959, Liu Shaoqi, China's head of state, quietly inspected several provinces. What he found contradicted every glowing report sent to Beijing. People eating leaves, villages silent except for the weak moans of the starving. Communes pretending to meet quotas while their residents collapsed behind barns. Yang Jisheng later described this system as a pyramid of lies, each level exaggerating production to survive the level above it. One grain storekeeper in Henan remembered being ordered to inflate the harvest figures. He said nothing, because telling the truth meant accusation, humiliation, and sometimes death. A teacher in Xinyang recalled that when cadres asked for the real grain numbers, no one dared answer. We lied to live another day. The lies reached Beijing, and Mao celebrated them. He ordered even higher quotas, even larger grain shipments, even stricter searches for hidden food. A mother in Fengyang County later told investigators what happened when the requisition teams arrived at her door. They took the jar, they took the pot, they took the spoon. After that, we waited for hunger to finish us. The Great Famine did not begin with empty fields. It began with orders. Orders built on ideology, enforced by fear, and carried out by men who believed that disobedience was more dangerous than starvation. By 1959, the lies had climbed all the way to Beijing, so Mao demanded proof, not from the fields, from the people. He issued new orders. Grain must be collected first, and the villagers may eat what is left. There was nothing left. But the quotas did not shrink. They grew. Historian Yang Jisheng describes the next phase as a state that ate before the people could. Requisition teams spread through Henan, Anhui, Sichuan. Not politely, not with paperwork, but with clubs, searches, and midnight knocks. A commune in northern Henan remembered the first raid as a night that sounded like war. Doors kicked open, children woken by shouting, the light of torches moving from house to house. Cadres didn't ask. "Do you have food?" They asked, "Where are you hiding it?" Cooking pots were seized, rice jars smashed. Even spoons were confiscated, because a family without a spoon could not cook secretly. Frank de Kutter writes that in some communes, officials took everything that could boil water. It was deliberate. If villagers couldn't cook, they couldn't resist. A mother in Fengyang County tried to hide a single sweet potato for her 2 surviving children. She buried it under cold ash in the corner of the room. A cadre found it. He held it up like a trophy. She fell to her knees begging. He beat her anyway. That sweet potato was taken to the commune granary, another addition to the inflated quota that would be reported to Beijing as progress. Her children starved. In Xinjiang, Henan, one of the hardest-hit regions, cadres set up watch stations. Villagers too weak to work were dragged there and forced to sit upright so they could not search for food on the ground. A survivor recalled, "It was like waiting to die while being watched." In Sichuan, ration cards were redistributed based on political loyalty. If you questioned the quotas, your ration was cut. If you complained, it was canceled. Hunger became a punishment. Starvation became a tool. By late 1959, the raids had hollowed out entire provinces. Homes with no grain were labeled counter-revolutionary. Families who kept a handful of kernels were accused of hiding property. A commune doctor in Henan remembered holding the bodies of dead children and saying nothing, because speaking meant being beaten, or worse. The state took the bowls. The state took the pots. The state took the grain. And when there was nothing left to take, it took the lives of those who remained. The famine was no longer an accident. It was policy. By 1960, the worst year, fields empty, barns locked, villages quiet except for the sound of wind and weeping. Historian Yang Jisheng wrote that by this point, hunger had stripped away the boundaries of humanity. In Henan, Anhui, Gansu, the living walked past the dead as if they were shadows on the road. When a state takes the food, it takes the rules next. A commune doctor in Henan recalled the first signs of collapse. Children eating clay, not for taste, for weight, to quiet the ache. He said they chewed it until their teeth cracked. Others boiled tree bark, mud, grasses that tore their throats. But hunger always wins. By winter 1960, in parts of Anhui and Henan, the famine crossed the final threshold. Yang Jisheng documented this with precision. Villagers exhuming the recently dead, families trading morsels of flesh for grain, starving parents unable to recognize the horror in front of them. It was not ritual, not madness. It was survival in a world stripped of every other option. One story survives from Henan, recorded decades later by investigators. A father with 2 remaining children. No grain, no work points, no rations. He found a body. A woman who had collapsed near the river. He took what he needed. He fed his children. He lived with the guilt until the day he died. He said, "Hunger makes devils out of men." In Anhui, cadres found a girl, 12, maybe 13, hiding in a grain storage pit. She wasn't there to steal. She was waiting. Her parents had died, her siblings gone. She stayed near the bodies because it felt safer than the empty house. When cadres pulled her out, she was too weak to stand. She died within a week. Decoder wrote of these scenes, "Death was a neighbor, and sometimes a meal." In the worst provinces, entire villages collapsed. People lay where they fell. Some dragged themselves to commune gates, not for food, for a witness, someone to see that they had lived. Even cadres could not hide the truth anymore. Reports, secret, trembling, reached higher levels. Starvation widespread. People boiling leather. Some eating the dead. But the reports were buried. Mao's quotas remained. By spring 1960, one commune in Henan had lost more than half its population. When investigators arrived years later, a surviving farmer told them, "We did not kill each other. Hunger killed us. We just used what hunger left behind." There was no shame in his voice, only emptiness, This was the world Mao's policies created, where ideology demanded the impossible and the impossible consumed the living. 1960. Hunger hollowed the land. But the famine did something deeper. It hollowed trust. The Great Leap Forward promised unity, communes, shared labor, shared grain. But when the grain was gone, China learned the cost of a system built on fear. Historian Yang Jisheng described this period as a society where survival required betrayal, where loyalty to Mao meant disloyalty to everyone else. Beijing ordered communes to establish mutual supervision teams, villagers monitoring villagers to prevent grain hiding. It became normal to report your neighbor, your friend, your relative. Confession meetings filled the nights. Whispers filled the days. A survivor from Sichuan said, "People stopped talking. We only listened for danger." In a village outside Dayang, a teenage boy reported his uncle for keeping grain from the commune. The grain was a handful of dried kernels his uncle had saved for his daughter. Too weak to stand, barely breathing. Cadres came at dawn, tore apart the house, found the kernels, beaten, arrested, gone. The girl died the next day. The boy lived with that memory until old age. He said, "I did it so we could keep our rations. I didn't want to die." This is what Mao's famine made of people, not villains, but survivors. In Anhui, a girl, maybe 15, stood up in a communal meeting and accused her parents of hiding wheat husks. Cadres praised her, called her a model revolutionary. Her parents were arrested, dragged away, never seen again. When famine investigators interviewed her decades later, she broke down. "I thought they would just take the husks," she said. "I didn't know they would take my parents." In Henan, villagers began patrolling each other's yards. If someone was seen digging at night, they were accused of digging for hidden grain. In Gansu, families lit no fires, not because they had nothing to cook, but because smoke meant suspicion. One report recorded a man who caught his neighbor scraping frost from the ground and eating it. He didn't help. He didn't speak. He said later, "If I helped him, I would have starved too." As starvation deepened, people no longer mourned the dead. They feared what mourning would reveal, that they had nothing left, no food, no power, no protection. In commune records from the period, one sentence appears repeatedly. Villagers cooperate out of fear, not belief. By late 1960, the famine had turned communities into informant networks. Everyone watched everyone. Everyone feared everyone, not because they were cruel, but because cruelty was safer than starvation. This was the famine's quiet victory. It replaced humanity with obedience. 1959 to 1960. China's fields were failing, but the reports flowing to Beijing told a different story. Grain yields rising, communes thriving. Red abundance everywhere. It was fiction, but fiction kept officials alive. Historian Frank de Coetter calls it a competition of lies, each county exaggerating production to please the one above it. When Mao toured Henan, local leaders staged fields thick as forests, grain transplanted from other villages just for his visit. Mao smiled. He raised quotas again. The illusion became policy. In Anhui, a county leader tried to correct the numbers, said the harvest was failing, that villagers were starving. He was dragged into a struggle session, beaten, humiliated, removed. His correction vanished. The inflated report stayed. When communes claimed impossible harvests, Beijing demanded impossible grain deliveries. Teams arrived with wagons, took what little grain remained, and left villages with nothing. A clerk in Sichuan later said, "We wrote lies to survive, but the lies killed the people." Even as internal reports warned of starvation, Mao insisted the problem was rightist sabotage, not policy failure. He ordered stricter grain collection, stricter investigations, stricter punishment. Truth starved, then people starved. By the end of 1960, millions were dead, not because the harvest failed, but because the truth did. The officials lied upward, Mao believed downward, and the people paid the price in bodies. Starvation was everywhere, but even hunger had rules. In the Great Leap Forward, food was political. Your right to eat depended on loyalty. Historian Yang Jisheng documents it bluntly. Food became a reward. Hunger became punishment. In every commune, meals were tied to work points, but by 1960, people were too weak to work. And if you couldn't work, you earned nothing. And if you earned nothing, you didn't eat. It was a death spiral. A school teacher in Henan, already trembling from hunger, asked for a smaller task so she could earn points again. Cadres accused her of laziness. They forced her to kneel on broken bricks for hours. She fainted. She never taught again. Many communes built labor discipline rooms, small sheds or storage spaces where those accused of stealing food were punished. Some were tied to posts. Some were beaten. Some were left without water for days. A commune doctor remembered seeing a man locked for grain theft over 2 handfuls of husks. He lasted 3 days. Villagers labeled reactionary, lazy, or grain hiders were denied rations entirely. One cadre said during a meeting in Gansu, "Feed the loyal first, let the doubtful consider their errors." People understood the message: apologize, confess, obey, or starve. By late 1960, the famine was not only killing the weak, it was killing the disobedient, the outspoken, the unlucky. Food was no longer sustenance. It was leverage, control, punishment. The Great Famine did not just starve bodies. It broke people into silence, one empty bowl at a time. 1961, China's countryside was a graveyard, but Beijing insisted everything was fine. No famine, no crisis, just temporary difficulty. Behind the silence, entire provinces were collapsing. Historian Yang Jisheng spent decades piecing together the truth. Officials burned records, altered ledgers, and erased entire village rosters to hide the scale of death. County clerks who tried to report real mortality were accused of slandering socialism. Some were demoted, some beaten. A few disappeared entirely. One survivor from Henan said, "The dead had no names. They vanished from the book as if they never lived." By 1961, families buried loved ones in shallow pits. No markers, no rituals, no mourning allowed. In Anhui, an investigator later found 6 corpses in a single hut. A grandmother, a mother, 4 children, all starved one by one. No report was filed. The commune wrote, "Family relocated." As the famine raged, Mao blamed bad weather and rightist elements, not the policies that caused the hunger. Internal documents were locked away. Provincial archives purged. Local cadres instructed, "Write nothing that harms the image of the revolution." Yang Jisheng estimates at least 36 million dead. Frank D. Cooter's research places the number closer to 45 million, the largest man-made famine in all of recorded history. A man from Xinjiang told researchers decades later, "We were not allowed to remember the dead. We were ordered to forget them." And for years, that is what China did. Not because the truth was unclear, but because the truth was forbidden. 1962. The famine was ending. Not because Mao stopped it, but because others stepped in after tens of millions were already gone. But the core truth remained. This was not a natural disaster. It was the cost of Mao Zedong's ideology. Throughout the famine years, reports of starvation reached Beijing. Cadres begged for lower quotas. Villages pleaded for grain release. Investigators warned entire counties were dying. Mao dismissed them. He said the complaints were exaggerations, rightist sabotage, or attempts to undermine socialism. He believed revolutionary will could defeat hunger, even when the bodies on the road said otherwise. In internal meetings at the time, Mao was recorded saying, "Better to let half the people die so the other half can eat their fill." A sentence that explained everything. Why quotas stayed high, why grain was seized, why truth was crushed. Human lives were expendable. The revolution was not. By late 1961, Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping quietly dismantled the most deadly policies, scaling back communes, restoring household plots, reducing quotas. Food slowly returned, but nothing could undo the graves already filled. No country should have suffered this, but Mao's China did, because one man's ideology was worth more than millions of lives. The Great Famine was not an accident, not a miscalculation, not nature. It was a political choice, a system that demanded belief, rewarded lies, and punished truth until hunger itself became a method of rule. This is the lesson the famine leaves behind. When a dictator decides ideas matter more than people, people disappear.